So meeting David was monumental for us, because while I didn't care for him as a person, I totally respected what he was teaching. I brought up arguments, I contradicted things with other scripture, and everything that I threw at him, he threw back with even more proof, even more scripture that showed me things that I had no clue about. So it was hard. Even when we were in California, when we first met him, I had a conversation with Mike, and we walked outside and we talked, and I told Mike I didn't like him, but I love him. I can't not hear this message. I just felt like my love for God and our desire to do what was right in God's eyes, I had no choice but to change my life. So we went back to Miami, ended up selling our belongings and changing our life. We had some ends to tie up and get people to take over things that we were doing in Miami, and moved to California. And at this point, we talked to our family and we tried to get our families to come with us. But they hadn't heard David. They didn't know the message. And for the most part, they thought we were crazy. So we let that go and we let them stay where they were. I did end up being able to bring my mother and my sister with me. And we got in a van. We drove to Texas. I had 3 kids from my first marriage when I married Mike, and we found out pretty much on the road to Texas that I was pregnant with Mike's child. We get to Texas and we learn a lot of new customs, like dinner is popcorn and bananas. Eat light before bed so it digests easier. And observing the daily twice a day. There were time frames for these that were based on sunrise and sunset. For us, the daily was just a short lesson. We had a Bible study there. Sometimes we had a partake of unleavened bread, and it's not as much of a ritual as it is just a chance in my mind for all of us to get together, be in one place, and thank God for the day. Thank God for the community that we had and the lesson that we were learning. And then we went about our day. We were given a place to stay. I did have 3 children and another one on the way. So I was given a house to live in, and I took care of my kids. The new light about the first seal, about no one being married to each other, everyone was married to God, the house of worship being God, and that information had already come out before we got there, but there were a lot of studies when we first got there, in the little building up near the gate that we went to, and David was there at the time, and he was speaking, and apparently the new light had been given out in California, and it was being brought back to Texas to people that still lived in Texas. California was used, I think, mostly for the workers that held jobs, and those people in Texas were the ones that were holding down the fort in Texas, that had kids, or the old people. So we were in Texas, so we learned the new light, and it was a tough time. It was a tough time for everyone, every married couple especially. I heard later from other people that Mike had a really hard time with it. Mike and I didn't talk about it that much. It was just, okay, so this is the way it is. We're married to God, not each other. And we accepted that. I spent my time making sure that physically I was capable of bringing another child into the world. who was going to be healthy. And that was my focus on my kids, my focus on my unborn child. Mike focused mostly on what could he do to be married to God. And I believe that his relationship with David was much stronger than mine was. I had a relationship with my children to cover first. My relationship with David was always estranged. And I think that being such a latecomer to the message really had a lot to play in that part too, because a lot of the people that had been there for years or been raised in the message just had a lot closer relationship with him and with each other than, a newcomer like me did. I think that the hard part for me was trying to fit in with the rest of the community. It took a while for me to get there. I'm not that easy to get along with. Mike, on the other hand, was super friendly and everyone got along with Mike, and it was a lot easier for him to become a part of this community. And he dove into it, and he ended up going to California and working with the rest of the workers. My sister went to California and worked with them. I stayed back in Texas, and then I had a midwife. Bonnie was going to be my midwife. That's David's mom. And Mary Belle Jones also helped with the birthing process. When I finally, Bryan, the child I was pregnant with, was born in March of 1990, and I already had 3 children, so I knew that my birthing process was going to be difficult. I knew what I had gone through before, and that it was probably going to be scary for the midwives. But eventually they gave up. I bled too much and they said, we're going to the hospital. So, because I apparently don't clot very well. But we went to the hospital, and within a couple of hours I had a baby. It was fine. So I came home, and Mike wasn't even there when Bryan was born. I think he was in California. But a lot of the people came back from California pretty quickly after that, I think for Passover. And Mike came at the time, and he got to see Bryan, held him a few times and played with him. But even though physically it was Bryan's son, we both wanted to see, physically it was Mike's son, we both wanted to see Bryan more as God's child. So we tried to deal with that situation a little bit, standoffish, I guess, because we wanted to see Bryan not as a way to join Mike and I together, because we both knew that we were married to God. But Bryan was a doll, and everyone loved him, and the kid never had to walk because everyone carried him everywhere. But family life at Mount Carmel, with or without the people from California being on the property, and that's where I stayed the whole time I was there, was at Mount Carmel. I never went to California. I just stayed there and took care of kids. Most of the time it was just mine, but sometimes it was other people's kids. We were all a community. The saying is, it takes a village to raise a kid. Well, it does. And we did that, and I think we did it well. I think we raised our kids really well.